Dennis Young here, Primitive Substance, Series 2, very special guest, one of the pioneers of modern music, and what an amazing career. And Rhys Chatham, thank you for coming back. This is part 3, and we left off with Danceteria and CBGBs, and now let's continue on with some more that you did and the music.
Well, Dennis, it's great to be back
Thank
for
you.
part 3 of this journey, this
Yes, it has
voyage down
been.
memories lane for me. So yeah, the last time we talked about the no wave period in New
Right.
York with groups like DNA and Teenage Jesus and the Jerks, Contortions, and Mars and Patti
Right.
Smith. Even before that, with the in rock, the generations happened so quickly. We had new wave,
Right.
and then it went into no wave, and then I guess it was towards the mid 80s, a new place had opened up that was very, very interesting in the East Village,
Okay.
called 8BC. And this was a kind of a performance art space that was on 8th Street between Avenues B and C. And they had a stage that was 15 feet high. It was this
wow.
incredible stage, and with a bar and a floor that could be a dance floor, or usually they had tables there. And you'd have performance artists there, like the names slip my mind, like Kipper Kids. Eric Bogosian would play there. Karen Finley. The list would go on and on. I'm missing lots of names, but Ann Magnuson would play there.
Oh, I remember her.
Yeah, she was great.
Salama.
You don't remember Karen Finley?
I might have. Maybe if I saw her, I'd probably know what she looked like.
Yeah, she did very dynamic performance pieces also. And but they also did music there. And
okay.
When I first at the time I was living on St. Mark's Place and First Avenue with my wife at the time, who was a dancer and choreographer. And I had heard of this place, and I had heard of my friend John Zorn playing there.
Oh, okay.
And so I thought it was one of John Zorn's places, or a place that was heavily associated with him. What was the name of that other club the club, you remember that club on Houston Street?
Oh, yeah. I can't think of the name of it.
What was that called?
I know
yeah, it'll come to me.
Okay.
But Zorn was really incredible, at that time. That he had come out of improvisation and composition simultaneously. And the great thing about him was that instead of only promoting his own music, he made sure that there were places where people who did weird music could play. He's always been like that.
How about that?
And he was very important for the scene in that way, and also for the music he did. So I thought that this new place, 8BC, was one of Zorn's places, but I was at Danceteria one night, and I met the proprietors of 8BC.
How about that?
One of them was, I don't have their names in mind. They're friends of mine.
Right.
Dennis was the name of one of them, and what was the name of that other guy? He's a Facebook friend, and I should remember. But in any case, they did all the programming there, and they said, no, it's not just John. We have all kinds of interesting music there. People playing like Elliott Sharp and his group Carbon. Yeah. And but not only experimental, all kinds of music that was playing in the East Village at the time. And so they invited me to play there.
Oh,
And I played there, and I went to this space and I loved it. It was really congenial for the development of performance art and music.
oh,
You have Arto Lindsay playing there
oh,
with a new, not with DNA, with a new formation, with his friend Mark Cunningham and China Bug playing in this improvisatory kind of things. It was really a place where people could try out things.
Oh, okay.
So the reason I'm talking about this is because I decided I would develop a new piece there. And prior to that, I had, as we discussed in the second video that we made, part 2, I had been working with a piece called Guitar Trio, which was, as the name implies, for 3 electric guitars, bass and drums, and also a piece that I had made in collaboration with the choreographer Cal Armitage called Drastic Classicism, which was for 4 electric guitars, bass and drums, with the drummer David Linton on drums, and, Scott Johnson, Ned Sublette, and Nina Canal on guitars. But I thought that perhaps what I do is make up the number of guitars. Well, I had the idea, Dennis, I mean, to be honest, I said, what if I did a piece for 100 guitars? Because there was this lady, I can't remember her name, but she was a composer who was doing pieces for 100 flutes. She did a piece for 100 trumpets that I played in Central Park. And they were really cool. And then some friend of mine from 8BC did a piece for 100 musicians at the Palladium. And they played songs like "Can't Get No Satisfaction."
I love to have heard that. Wow,
it was really powerful. It was really great. And I thought, well, why don't I do a piece for 100 electric guitars?
How about
do
that?
it in a small room and call it Torture Box.
I like that name.
Yeah, I was still into the punk aesthetic, And
now, how big was this place? Sorry to interrupt you. Was it the size of the kitchen, or was it a little bigger?
Well, I didn't do it. I thought that I was just thinking about it.
Oh, okay.
And I thought that I'd like to get 100 guitars together and put them in special tunings. And really, really noisy, because people are calling me a noise rocker at that time. There was a festival that happened at White Columns that my friend Thurston Moore organized, and we have to talk about them, but we'll get to that.
Sure.
And even though I didn't consider what I was doing noise, with Guitar Trio or Drastic Classicism, that the name stuck, and I thought I'd go with it. And I was with Cal Armitage. We were touring in Italy, and I told her about this idea, and she said, I bet you can't name 100 guitarists. You can't find 100 guitarists to do this. And so we made a bet, and I wrote down the names of all the guitarists that I knew personally, and I came up with 80 that I just knew from the scene, that would do it. And Carol came up with 20 others.
How about
that she knew. And so I realized it was possible. I lost the bet, but I realized it was possible. But I didn't feel I was ready to write a piece for 100 electric guitars. I thought it would I didn't want to do, of course, if you put 100 guitars together, it's going to be an event.
Right,
and,
of course.
Just for no one had done that specifically before. And so just because of the uniqueness of it, people would come, and it'd probably be fantastic. And as I said, some friends of mine from APC had put together an orchestra of 100 musicians playing Rolling Stones songs, and it sounded great. But I wanted to do something that was a real composition and that was a real reflection of my aesthetic and where I was coming from. So instead of writing a piece for 100 electric guitars, I upped the number to 6.
Okay.
And I developed it at this place that I just mentioned called 8BC. And which was great because they gave me an opportunity. We tried it out, and then I'd make changes. APC was great because it was a place where I could play once every 6 weeks.
Oh, okay.
And around that time, I had been working with a visual artist named, I had been, when I was doing Guitar Trio, I had been working with a visual artist named Robert Longo, who did a very famous series of black and white portraits called Men in the Cities. And I had asked him to do a series of slides for me with Guitar Trio, which he called Pictures for Music, which to this day I still show when I play Guitar Trio.
Oh, okay.
Wow. But 5 years had gone by, and I would still continue to be friends with Robert. I was collaborating with another visual artist named Joseph Neckvital, who was a visual artist known on the Soho scene. And through his contact, we found a studio in a basement in the same building as the composer Laurie Spiegel and the visual artist Richard Serra on Duane Street. And it was, in fact, the basement of a private gallery called the Elaine Danheiser Gallery. And Joseph used the studio for his paintings and his visual work. And I was able to use the studio to develop Guitar Trio.
Oh, that's
not Guitar Trio, this new piece that I was making. And so I rehearsed it in Joseph Neckvital's studio, and we would get together with the musicians 3 times a week. The musicians included Bill Brovold on electric guitar, Susan Stenger, Robert Poss of the Band of Susans, Ben Neal of Ben Neal, and musicians who's primarily a trumpet player, but he played guitar in this piece. Ernie Brooks was on bass, and JP. You remember a band called the Dictators?
Oh yeah, yep.
Yeah, JP was and still is to this very day the drummer for the Dictators.
How about that?
Dictators is you hear a name like that and it sounds scary and fun.
Right.
They're real up and very, very positive rock and roll band.
How about that?
And JP is a very, very strong drummer. And so we developed this piece with him. I had to find a name for the piece, and we had played at the Mers Music Festival, which is a jazz festival in Germany, and we got a review in Stern magazine, which is like Life magazine or maybe Newsweek in Germany, and they said that we were Die Donnergötter, which means the Thundergods. And I thought that's a great name for the piece. So that's what we called it, the Thundergods or Die Donnergötter. So whereas before I tuned the guitars for Guitar Trio in just intonation using the normal strings of the guitar, except tuning them in just intonation. And of course, I gave my friend Glenn Branca, who played in the original version of that piece, a guitar that was in octave tunings, which was like 3 low E strings and 3 D strings tuned up to an E. So I decided to continue with that idea and make all of the guitars have these special octave tunings. And so 3 of them were in the soprano range. So there were 3 high E strings and three, what were they?
B strings.
3 D strings tuned up to an E. And so those were, we called those the soprano guitars. And then we had the alto guitars, which were 3 normal A strings and then 3 G strings tuned up to an A. And finally, we had the tenor guitars, which were what I gave Glenn originally, 3 low E strings and 3 D strings tuned up to an E. And for the bass, we had Ernie Brooks
That's
the
better
bass
than
player.
that.
Ernie was the bass player for the Modern Lovers, and I had met him, as I said in part 1, in Peter Gordon's band Love of Life Orchestra,
Right.
And since this point in time, we've collaborated ever since to this very day. And so that was the band: 6 electric guitars, bass, and drums. And we developed this piece, and it finally came out as a record on the German label Dossier Records. And it was re-released by Homestead Records. You remember them?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. What was the guy's name? Gerard Cosley, I think. And their motto was, the motto of Homestead Record was, because we thought it was a good idea at the time.
I like that.
They put out a lot. They put out a lot of weird music, and so people say, "Why don't you put that out for?" Because we thought it was a good idea.
Yeah, about that. That's great.
And that was the record. So they put it out in the States, and then it went out of print. And in the meantime, I decided to move to France.
Okay.
And the reason I moved to France is because I fell in love with a French lady.
Okay.
The French lady was a person I was living with in New York, and I met her in the context of Carol Armitage's dance company. And she had choreographing herself and got grants from the New York State Council on the Arts, and her career was taking off in the States. But then in France, there was a very good president who was elected named François Mitterrand.
Okay.
And the thing that was special about him, and I personally, I liked his politics, but the other reason that we both liked him was because he devoted 1% of the national budget of France to the arts, and that's like a huge amount of money.
And sure.
So my wife said, "Rhys, you can stay here, but I'm going back to France," because she wanted to get in on that very, very vibrant dance scene that they had there. There were all very, very exciting stuff in dance with choreographers like Régine Chapignon, Jean-Claude Galota. Oh, the list went on and on. And so she invited, so I decided I'd go with her, because with Carol, I had toured France a lot and I liked it there. And I liked wine, I liked baguettes. And so I thought I'd give it a whirl.
Yeah, you go.
And so I went to France and hooked up with an agent there named Francis Falsetto. Now, this is a person who's very well known for producing these beautiful records of Ethiopian music. Can't remember the name of the label.
Oh, wow.
But people who are into Ethiopian music and world music would know the name Francis Falsetto. And so I hooked up with him and his partner, Anazik Prozeik. And at first I thought I was going to be working with Anais, but she was more into filmmaking and doing documentaries. And although she was very interested in music, she encouraged me to work with Francis, which I did. And the reason I'm talking about this was because it was thanks to Francis that the idea of the 100 electric guitars that I had back in the mid 80s came to fruition, that my dream came true.
Oh, okay.
Francis found a place in Lille, France, which is in the northern part of France, that had a big rock club in this big, beautiful space called L'Aéronef, which means the spaceship.
Oh,
And
wow.
the director fell in love with the project and decided to commission me to write a piece for 100 electric guitars.
Oh,
So
wow.
I had
That's neat.
learned a lot from writing the Thundergods. The piece is fully notated. Oh, I didn't mention that. With
Okay.
Guitar Trio and with Drastic Classicism, there are performance instructions that are in prose that are
Right.
That's how there was a score, but it wasn't musical notation. And the reason for that
okay.
is with Guitar Trio and Drastic Classicism, I wanted to write a piece or pieces with a rock instrumentation and rock musicians. And rock musicians don't necessarily read music. And
Okay.
so I did it in prose so that it would be easy for rock musicians to play. But I decided with Die Donnergötter that I wanted to write everything out, and I wanted to use a classical form. So I wrote that piece in sonata form. By the
Wow.
way, I'll send you a link to the Thundergods that you can post
Oh,
so
please.
that people can listen to it.
Oh, that'd be
And also
great.
Drastic Classicism. But I learned a lot. You know, it's the first piece I'd written for electric guitars that was fully notated. So I decided to do the same thing with the piece for 100 electric guitars, which I called An Angel Moves Too Fast to See.
Oh, very
And
nice.
so I worked the whole in the music world. A device had just come out. Like, how was I going to imagine this piece? As a composer, because I was classically trained, I can hear sounds in my head and write them down,
Okay.
or with the help of a piano, certainly. But I wanted to actually hear the sounds that I was working with. And a device, an electronic device, had just come out called the Akai S900. And
Oh, okay.
this was do you know this?
No, I don't know that.
Oh, this was a revelation to the hip hop world. Hip hop
Oh, wow.
first was able to, well, hip hop
Right.
was able to come out because of vinyl records and groups like Fab Five, Freddy, working with vinyl to create these new sounds and breakdancing.
Right.
To start of the 80s. But by the mid 80s, this device came out, the S900, the Akai S900, that could take a sound and sample it. And so you
Oh,
play on a keyboard and it would be the actual sound of a clarinet or the actual sound of a saxophone player
oh,
or
okay. I
whatever
remember
instrument
that.
you
Right.
wanted, a cough, could be a sneeze. Now, this sounds like nothing now in the year 2024,
Right.
but at the end of the 80s, it was a revelation for
Yeah, of
musicians.
course.
And the whole genre, a whole genre of hip hop was based around it and around these sounds. And people were using them in all kinds of contexts. And I have a friend, a composer friend who's blind. And he said, Rhys, for a blind person, this is a really mind blowing
I'm
because
sure.
for us,
Sure.
we can't tell the difference. It sounds like something real. And so what I was able to do was take the sounds of Die Donnergötter, which is 6 electric guitars playing, and multiply them on the sampler to simulate the sound of 100 guitars.
Oh,
And I
wow.
was able to
That's neat.
literally write and score the entire piece on this sampler. Back then, most composers weren't using Macs because they're a little expensive. Some of us did. At the time, there was a computer called the Atari computer, which was a gaming computer, but
All
it
right.
had a Windows environment before Windows existed,
Oh, I didn't
and
know that.
everybody was using DOS. And so
Right.
a number of programs came out for composers, and the one that I used was by a fellow named Dr. T.
Oh, how
And so
about
I
that?
developed the piece on that, and who also had a notation program, so I was able to print the scores out. And it even had little grids for so where the guitarists could put their fingers. And
Oh, how
uh,
about that? Didn't know that.
yeah, now most of the people, so no one had ever done a piece for 100 electric guitars like this before. It was a real first, and the year was 1989.
Wow.
And so we did the rehearsals, and we were, Francis and I and the team. By this time, we had switched drummers. The piece was for 100 electric guitars, recruited
Right.
locally in Lille, in that region of the north of France. And the bass player, of course, was Ernie Brooks, one bass player. And the
Right.
drummer by this time, JP, had to go and work with the Dictators. And Jonathan Kane of Swans
Okay.
offered to take his place, and we went on a tour together playing Die Donnergötter, the Thundergods. And I don't know if you know Jonathan, but he's a monster.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah,
I
and
had a podcast with him, so I was
yeah,
able
so
to speak with him.
he's a brilliant,
Oh, it's
brilliant
great.
drummer. He hits the drums really, really hard, or he can, and but yet somehow poetically. And
Oh,
he's just amazing, and it was a real honor working with him. And he developed all the drum parts for this piece, "An Angel Moves Too Fast to See," and Ernie Brooks developed the bass parts, and I wrote the 100 guitar parts.
oh, wow.
And so when we all got together, we all converged, the 100 guitarists, Ernie, Jonathan, and me. We were nervous because
I'm mad. That must have been some group.
I
Wow.
mean, I knew what it was gonna had an idea of what it would sound like thanks to the Akai S900 sampler,
Right.
but I don't know how accurate that was going to be. And when we heard the first sounds come out, we were all in awe.
I imagine.
We just felt like bowing down to the goddess of music
Oh, sure.
because we had never heard a sound like that before. Not only was it the sound of 100 guitars, but it was the sound of 100 guitars in these special octave tunings. And again, this was, I have to say this is a real first. It's 1989, first piece
Wow.
for 100 electric guitars. We did it over 3 nights, and I'll give you links of videos
Yes,
of
please, because
one of the
I
performances
would have loved to have been there to see that. That must have been
that
incredible.
that we did, and we did it all over France. And
Wow.
in the 80s and 90s, we performed it all over the world, from Australia to all over Europe and
Wow.
Berlin, and finally at New Music America in 1990 in Montreal. And so this was a new era of music for me, of working with this orchestra of 100 electric guitars. And then by then, time went on, and I decided to do another piece for 100 electric guitars, which was called A Secret Rose. And then
Okay.
to finish this period, I wrote a third piece for
Oh,
electric guitars called A Crimson Grail.
oh,
Now,
okay, I've heard of that. I've listened to that. Yeah, it's really
yeah,
intense.
yeah. Now takes this up now. We started at the year 1989. And so this takes us up to the year 2005. And before I get to 2005, I'll just tell you what happened in between.
Sure.
Uh, the thing about, I was touring with this orchestra of 100 electric guitars in the sense of we play it in different cities. I think we played it in a total of 30 cities all over the world. Not this particular piece, but one of the pieces for 100 electric guitars. But the thing is, every time we do it, we recruit musicians locally.
Okay.
And I take a team from New York and from France to teach the music to the players in 2 or 3 rehearsals and culminating in a performance. But there are just so many times you can do this performance. If I can do 1 or 2 a year, I consider
I'm
myself
sure.
lucky. And I'm a musician. I like to play. So what do you do after you've written a piece for 100 electric
Right,
guitars?
right.
1,000 electric guitars,
Yeah.
400 electric guitars. Of course, one could take that route. But I was very concerned about losing my hearing.
Oh,
I
okay.
developed, I was doing the 100 guitars and we were on the stage and I heard what I thought was a test tone. And I
Oh,
said to the sound man, Pascal Benz, who's done sound for the electric guitar since the beginning and continues to do it, Pascal, what is that test tone you're playing? And he said, I am not playing a test tone.
oh, okay.
And I was hearing it internally, and it was
Wow.
the onset of tinnitus. And fortunately, the frequency I heard was around 500 cycles, which is kind of low. And I'm
Oh,
glad it didn't stay that way.
right,
And it went up to around 15,000 cycles. And so I still hear it at this very moment. I'm hearing it.
right.
But I'm a minimalist composer, and so it's like I'm hearing
Yeah,
minimalist music all the time. I don't even notice it anymore. But I decided that I wanted to play a softer instrument than electric guitar,
right.
and I didn't want to play flute again at that time. So I switched to trumpet and did. This was in 1991, I think is when I started playing trumpet. And the first lessons I took were with Ben Neal, and then I took, who was one of the guitarists, but who was a virtuoso
Right.
trumpet player. And then with a fellow named Carmine Caruso, who is a kind of trumpet therapist that a lot of people
Oh,
go
okay.
to. And finally, with some people in France, and I'm having a memory lapse, and the
That's
name will
okay.
come to me. But it took 10 years, but finally I was able to play trumpet. And
Wow. Oh,
did a series of pieces that were more improvisatory, on the improvisatory side of things. And the reason I'm talking about this is because I developed took a new direction. And part of the reason for that was my wife got pregnant,
okay.
and so we had a daughter. And
Oh, okay.
when you have a kid, oh boy, it changes everything.
I'm sure.
And whereas before I was able to have hours and hours and hours of time in front of me just thinking about music, when you have a kid, if you can't afford to have a nanny, which was not within either of our means, someone has to be taking care of the kid. And
Right.
so my wife was a dance teacher, And so she'd be out of the house. So it was me who was taking care of the kid.
Okay.
And also my studio was in the home where I lived.
Oh,
So
okay.
I couldn't compose anymore in the way that I had. But the thing about trumpet is you can't play it for more than 2 hours at a time, and because your lips will get tired. And also the direction that I was taking was rather than studying classical music or playing Bach on trumpet, the technique I had studied was coming out of jazz. So, I learned how to improvise over 2-5-1 chords.
Right.
I learned how to play the blues at any tempo and in any key and all the things that a jazz trumpet player is supposed to know how to do. And I ended up doing a mixture of ideas coming out of classical contemporary music and free jazz.
Right.
And we can hear the result of this on a number of records. I'd started work with a composer named Martin Wheeler, who's a British composer. And we had a record come out on the British label Ninja Tune.
Got it.
It was one of their sub-labels. At this time, this is a long parenthesis, I'm sorry, but
That's okay.
But a very vital strain of music had just come out called drum and bass. Remember that?
Oh yeah,
When that
absolutely.
came out?
Yeah.
So there was this whole movement that started in the 90s after I had done the guitar pieces, broadly under the name of electronica. And it was the thing that the center of activity when it first came out was in Europe, because, and especially Germany and London, and then later in the States in Detroit, where house music was developed.
Right.
And then it spread out to everywhere in the States. But the great thing about it was that it was electronic music that didn't have a voice over it. And so it transcended language. And so you have these groups like, well, it's not group, it's this composer named Aphex Twin.
Oh, I remember them.
Remember him? Well, he's still around.
He's still, I know.
Scanner, who's was the stage name of Robin Rambeau. We're doing electronic music, purely electronic music. It was absolutely gorgeous.
Yep.
The transcended language, so you didn't have to speak English, so the German crew could get in. There's all kinds of great music coming out of Germany, and it was very, very vital. And so I wanted to play trumpet with that kind of music. And so this record that I made got listed as one of the 50 best records by the Wire magazine. We're very proud of that.
That's a great thing, right?
Yeah.
To get in that magazine's tough. So that's
great. Tell me about it. Yeah, and so that was the first time I had been in Rewind. And the album was a real changer. It was like I took an idea from Miles Davis and put the trumpet through all kinds of effects, like fuzz and delay and effects like that. And I started touring around with it as a solo. I developed a solo piece called Manifest that I toured around with. So simultaneously with my work with guitar, I was pursuing a solo career. And so this brings us up to 2005. And the city of Paris had a festival that they did every year called La Nuit Blanche, which means the white night. And
Okay.
it's called the White Night because the idea was the city of lights would be lit up for all the night while
Oh,
they would have, it was like the first Saturday in October. And so what they asked me to do was write a piece that we could play in this big cathedral-like basilique called Sacré-Cœur, the Sacred
oh,
Heart, which is
wow,
that big church. It's cathedral, really,
wow.
up on the top of the hill in Paris. And it's this huge cavernous space. So I went there with Jonathan Kane to see what the acoustics are like. And
Wow.
Jonathan had a snare drum and he hit one hit. And 15 seconds later, we still heard the sound.
Oh, wow. That must
There
have been
was a
incredible.
15-second delay time in this place. And so there was no question we weren't going to be able to play with Jonathan's drum kit.
Right.
So what we decided to do, it was a huge space. So conceptually, I wanted to surround the audience in a single row with guitarists.
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah, so
That
we
sounds
did that.
incredible.
Yeah, we did that. And I thought I would need 400 guitars to do that. So I advertised for people to volunteer. And we didn't get 400, we got 126.
That's still a
And
lot. That still must have sounded
well,
something.
and it turns out that's all we needed. It was fine. And even with 126, we got 2 rows of 54,
Oh, okay.
and that's all it took to surround the audience. And we put candles in front,
Oh, that must have been.
votive candles in front of each one. It's very beautiful. And so Crimson Grail is what we call an antiphonal piece. It means that we path the sound around the cathedral. It goes from north to south to
Oh,
east to
okay.
west. And so I really played around with that. But before we could do it, we had to get the approval of the Monsignor. We had to get the approval of the abbey, if you like, of
Got it.
the church. And he wasn't too. They had never had instruments like this. And
Oh, I'm
he said,
sure.
Rhys, the mission of the church is prayer 24/7. And there's always somebody in there praying. And even when the church closes, they have people in
Right.
there that are praying. And, so he said, I don't know. And I said, but Father, it's music to
Yeah.
pray to.
There you go.
And
Good answer.
yeah.
That was
And,
great.
the representative of Louis Blanche thought it was a pretty funny answer also. And you know how some religious guys like the Dalai Lama are all smiley, or the
Right,
Pope,
right,
I
right.
mean, they're
Of
just
course.
this jolly
Yep.
sort of guy, and you know how you have someone's that are very strict
Oh, yeah,
and
of course.
serious.
Right, right.
Well, this Monsignor, he was a strict variety,
Oh,
right?
boy.
And he was like this the
What?
entire
Yeah.
time we were negotiating the contract.
Wow.
And I made a deal with him for his concern for the prayer. I say, here's what we could do. We'll play the music for half an hour,
Right.
and then we'll pray for half an hour.
There you go. That's great.
Yeah. And so La Nuit Blanche wanted me to do this from 7 at night, which is when the festival started, to
Right.
7 in the morning.
Holy smoke.
Yeah.
Wow. That's
And
something.
so we signed the contract with the Monsignor, and then the only time he smiled, he got this little beatific smile.
Oh, that's
He
great.
said, Rhys, I'll see how much praying I can do during this.
Oh, that's great.
It was really funny.
You
But
know,
we signed the contract.
we're running
Huh?
out of time, a little almost already, but can you believe it? But keep going a little more. I'm telling you,
Okay,
this is
so I'll
great.
just finish up on this story, and
Great,
then we'll be
great.
done. We'll be done with the 100 guitars
Great.
and be able to go on the next thing.
Sure.
So that's exactly what we did. I wrote 3 sections to the piece of a half an hour each,
Wow.
and we played that. And Dennis, it's 3 a.m. You know, they let in a new group of people in for every time. And, you know, so we play for a half an hour, and then a new group of people would come in, and the church was filled. It was
How about
packed.
that? Wow.
And 3 a.m, and the feeling was so religious, because this music has a kind of religious feel to it when you're right in it. I felt like I was in a medieval church, you know, back in the 1400s or something. It was just incredible.
Now, is this for video? Did you videotape this at all? Is there a video of this?
We did videotape it, but fortunately, somebody made a recording of it on a DAT recorder.
Oh, I got it. Okay.
Which was released, that version was released on the Table of the Elements records. And you know the Table of Elements records.
Of course, yes.
And the Table of Elements went out of print for a while, but they're coming back, and they're going to do re-releases of that recording.
Oh, okay. I got to get that.
Sacré-Cœur, I think it was 2007.
I would love to hear that.
2007 version, which is very much different from the piece that we did in Lincoln Center in 2010. And I'll talk more about that next time.
Great. You know, this has been really fantastic. Thank you for doing this. We'll go on to part 4, and we have to do part 5, but you've had some career, and thank you for sharing it with us. I'm sure everybody out there is really happy to hear this. And put all of this, and let me know about the descriptions, and I'll put it in the description of what we talked about today, because I'm sure the listeners are going to love to actually hear this, what you've done, and etc. So we'll look forward to part 4, and we'll continue on. Rhys,
take care, Dennis. Thank you.
I'll see you again. Bye-bye.
See you next time.
Bye-bye. Take care.